Lagos moved fast. Too fast for Heartbreak. By Monday morning, the city had already swallowed another sunrise. Yellow buses screamed through crowded roads. Conductors hung halfway out of moving danfos, shouting destinations with voices rough from years of chaos. CMS. Festac. 6 straight. Street hawkers weaved dangerously between cars, balancing trays of plantain chips, cold drinks, and phone chargers on their heads like trained performers in an endless show. The city was alive. But Amaka still felt stuck. It had been almost 3 weeks since things ended with Dennis. 3 weeks since the late-night calls stopped. 3 weeks since she realized love could disappear quietly, without warning, without betrayal, without a fight. And somehow that made it worse, because anger would have been easier. Instead, all she had left were memories. The dangerous kind. The kind that arrive unexpectedly. In traffic. During songs. In restaurants. In silence. That evening, Amaka sat with her best friend Victoria, at a small rooftop lounge in Lekki. The city lights stretched endlessly behind them like glitter scattered across darkness. "You need to leave your house more," Victoria said, sipping her drink. Amaka laughed softly. "I'm outside now. Physically, yes. Emotionally. You're still inside your room crying to old messages." "I was never crying. Please," Victoria scoffed dramatically. "You and Heartbreak have been doing night vigil together." That finally made Amaka laugh properly. A real laugh. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in weeks. Victoria smiled immediately. "There she is." Amaka shook her head. "You make everything sound unserious. Because life is already serious enough." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Music drifted softly through the air while Lagos glittered beneath them. Then Victoria leaned closer. "So, are you going to tell me the real reason you came out tonight?" Amaka frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You've checked your phone 17 times in 1 hour." "I have not." "You have." Amaka sighed. Maybe she had. Because deep down, a small part of her still expected Dennis to suddenly realize he made a mistake. That maybe one random night, he would call and say, "I miss you." But reality was cruel sometimes. And silence was also an answer. Across town, Dennis sat alone in his apartment staring at an untouched plate of food. The television played quietly in the background, but he wasn't listening. His younger brother, Kunal, leaned against the kitchen doorway watching him carefully. "You look terrible," Kunal finally said. "Thank you. I'm serious." Dennis rubbed his face tiredly. "I'm fine." Kunal walked closer. "No, you're not." Dennis stayed quiet. Because the truth was, he wasn't. Ending things with Amaka was supposed to make things easier, cleaner, simpler. Instead, everything felt heavier. He missed her laugh. Her random voice notes. The way she always stole food from his plate after claiming she wasn't hungry. Even the small arguments. Especially the small arguments. And that scared him. Because if he still missed her this much, then why had his feelings changed? Or maybe they hadn't changed as much as he thought. Kunal sat beside him. "You know," he said quietly, "sometimes people confuse emotional exhaustion for lost feelings." Dennis looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means maybe you were drowning in work and pressure and stress. And instead of fixing yourself, you convinced yourself the relationship was the problem." Dennis looked away immediately. Because somewhere deep down, that possibility terrified him. The next few days passed slowly for Amaka. She focused more on work. Spent more time with friends. Started sleeping earlier. Healing wasn't dramatic anymore. It was gradual. Quiet. Like learning how to breathe normally again. Then one Friday evening, something unexpected happened. Her office organized a small networking event at an art gallery on Victoria Island. Amaka almost didn't go. But Victoria practically forced her out of the house. "You cannot continue behaving like the ambassador of Heartbreak," she declared. So reluctantly, Amaka went. The gallery was beautiful. Soft golden lights. Paintings stretched across white walls. Live music floating gently through the room. People laughed over glasses of wine while discussing art they probably didn't fully understand. For the first time in a long while, Amaka felt light. Until she saw him. Dennis. Standing near the far corner of the gallery, talking to someone. Her heart stopped briefly, then started again. Too fast. Too loud. As if her body still remembered him before her mind could catch up. Dennis looked up. And saw her too. The entire room suddenly disappeared. No music. No conversations. Just them. looking at each other across a crowded room filled with strangers. Amaka quickly looked away first. Her chest tightened instantly. Not because she still wanted him back, but because some people become emotionally familiar to you, and seeing them again after losing them feels strange, like visiting a house you once lived in. Eventually, Dennis walked toward her, slowly, carefully, as though afraid she might disappear. "Hi," he said softly. Amaka forced a polite smile. "Hi. You look good." "Thank you." Awkward silence followed immediately, the kind that only exists between two people who once knew each other deeply. Dennis rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Same." Another silence. Then finally, "How have you been?" he asked. Amaka almost laughed. How had she been? Sad, confused, angry, healing, growing, breaking, recovering. But instead she simply said, "I'm okay." Dennis nodded slowly, as though he knew that okay never really meant okay. Before he could speak again, a female voice interrupted. "Dennis." Both of them turned. A tall woman approached with confident steps and placed a hand lightly on Dennis's arm. She was beautiful, elegant, composed, and instantly, Amaka felt something twist painfully inside her chest. Not jealousy exactly, just realization. The woman smiled politely at Amaka. "Hi." Dennis looked suddenly uncomfortable. "Oh, Amaka, this is Zara." Something about the hesitation in his voice said everything. Amaka smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." "You too," Zara replied warmly. But Amaka barely heard her, because suddenly all the unanswered questions began connecting themselves painfully inside her mind. Had there been someone else? Was this why he changed? Was this why he pulled away? Dennis opened his mouth to explain something, but Amaka stopped him gently. "It's okay." And somehow, that hurt him more, because she sounded sincere, not angry, not emotional, just tired. She excused herself shortly after, but the moment she stepped outside the gallery, tears filled her eyes instantly. Not because Dennis moved on, but because a part of her had secretly hoped their story wasn't truly over, and seeing another woman beside him felt like the final page closing. Later that night, rain poured heavily across Lagos. Amaka sat inside a Bolt ride staring out the window while blurry city lights stretched across wet roads. Her phone buzzed. "Dennis." She ignored it. Another message came almost immediately. "Please let me explain." She closed her eyes, then locked the phone. Because explanations were dangerous. They reopen wounds that are finally trying to close. Meanwhile, inside his apartment, Dennis paced restlessly. Zara sat quietly watching him. "You still love her," she said calmly. Dennis stopped moving. "It's complicated." "No," Zara replied softly. "It's actually very simple." He looked at her, and for the first time, guilt flooded his chest completely. Because Zara wasn't the reason things ended with Amaka, but she also wasn't innocent. She had entered his life during the period when everything with Amaka already felt fragile. Late work nights became conversations. Conversations became emotional comfort. And emotional comfort became emotional attachment. Nothing physical happened while he was still with Amaka. But emotionally, maybe he had already started leaving before the relationship officially ended. And maybe that was the truth he couldn't face. Zara stood slowly. "You should talk to her honestly." Dennis looked exhausted. What difference would it make now? Zara gave a sad smile. Closure. The following evening, Amaka sat on her balcony listening to rain hit the metal rooftops nearby. Lagos looked softer after rain. Calmer. Almost vulnerable. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a long message from Dennis. She stared at it for several seconds before finally opening it. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to be honest. I met Zara through work months ago. Nothing happened between us while we were together, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't become emotionally confused before things ended. I didn't leave because of her alone. I think I was already lost in myself long before then. But instead of communicating properly, I shut down. And I hurt you in the process. You deserved honesty earlier. I'm sorry." Amaka read the message twice, then a third time. And strangely, she didn't cry. Because deep down, part of her had already sensed it. Not cheating. Not betrayal. Just distance. Emotional drifting. The kind that happens slowly until one person wakes up and realizes they're no longer standing where they used to be. She stared out at the city lights quietly, then finally typed back, "Thank you for telling the truth." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, his reply came. "I never wanted to become someone who hurt you." Amaka looked at the message for a long time, then slowly typed, "Maybe pain is part of loving people. Even good people hurt each other sometimes." When she sent it, something inside her shifted. Not magically, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe easier. Enough to stop carrying questions that no longer needed answers. Weeks passed, and slowly, life continued. Amaka started smiling more naturally again. She spent weekends exploring new places with Victoria. She reconnected with old hobbies, started writing again. Little pieces of herself returned gradually. Then one evening, while attending a small poetry event in Ikoyi, she met someone. His name was David. He wasn't overly charming, wasn't trying too hard, didn't speak like a man auditioning for romance. And maybe that was why talking to him felt easy. They spent almost an hour discussing music, books, and Lagos traffic like old friends. At some point, David smiled and asked, "So, are you always this guarded?" Amaka laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." She looked down briefly, then surprised herself by answering honestly, "I think heartbreak changes people." David nodded slowly. "It does." There was no pity in his voice, no pressure, just understanding. And for the first time in a long while, Amaka realized something important. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending someone never mattered. It simply means allowing yourself to believe that life can still be beautiful afterward. That same night, across another part of Lagos, Dennis sat alone in traffic watching rain slide across his windshield. His radio played softly. People crossed busy roads carelessly beneath glowing streetlights. Life moved forward relentlessly. And somewhere within that endless Lagos chaos, he finally accepted something painful. You can love someone and still lose them. Not because they were wrong for you, not because they were bad, but because timing, emotions, and human hearts are complicated. Sometimes love survives. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, you only understand the value of what you had after it's gone. A month later, Amaka returned once again to the old bus stop where everything began. The roof was still damaged. The bench still old. The city still loud. Rain clouds gathered slowly overhead. She smiled to herself. Funny how life worked. Once upon a time, this place reminded her of beginnings. Then it reminded her of pain. Now, it simply reminded her that she survived both. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from David. "You disappeared after the poetry event. I still think I deserve that coffee." Amaka smiled. A small smile, but real. She looked up as rain finally began falling gently across Lagos once more. Then she typed back, "Maybe you do." And somewhere beneath the endless city lights, beneath the traffic, the heartbreak, the memories, and the healing, life quietly began again. This has been Moonlight Stories with Diane, a Sparks of Life Studios original. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy stories like this, and I'll see you in the next story. Good night.